Hey, well, let's talk about immigration. There's a lot of talk about immigration in the recent weeks. I want to talk about
Is
why
there?
it is. Is it? Yeah, I
Is
wonder.
there? No.
Yeah. Let's just steelman why it is good for America, and then later on we can also steelman why it is bad. The cases with that.
No, it is good. Like it just is good. I mean, there are negatives, but like it's a good thing. Um, what's the issue? Like what?
So like, why? No, why? How does like the U.S. or like say Canada or Europe benefit from immigration?
Well, so first, like we are like the most obvious reason is like we are facing like a demographic collapse, right? All of the developing or developed world is facing that. So to stimmy that, you would need immigration, or that's what everyone's saying, right? Because we don't know how to fix the how to raise our birth rates. And the second thing is you can say it grows the pie, right? As people come in, right? The need for more infrastructure, the need for more services, the need for more business and the economies of scale, right? As a whole, it's beneficial, right? And you see this in the US, right? Like a lot of the farmers and stuff like that, they still need laborers, right? And a lot of them are illegal. Now the question of illegal versus legal, that's the caveat, right? That people are facing. And the reason why there's even this huge debate between illegals and legals is because first of all, it's very hard to get legal citizenship. So you might ask like, hey, why don't they just make that really easy, right? Like we'll let everyone in. And we'll ignore the common stuff like, oh, there's security risk and all of that. Well, the thing is, it's like if they're legal, they get minimum wage, they get benefits, they get OSHA or whatever it's called, like
OSHA.
OSHA, workplace hazard pay, and all of that stuff, right?
Mhm.
And that defeats the purpose of having immigrants, which is like cheap labor, right? Like that's the very base case, right? Like we're gonna start with the base case, which is cheap
Well,
labor.
there's two ends of like the immigrants, right? There's a low end and there's also the high end, right? The Einsteins and like
Yeah, so
those
like
groups.
on the high end, that's never. I don't think that's ever a problem, right? Like that's never been denied,
Mm.
right? Like everybody thinks it's good, right? And everybody's like, oh, you want more entrepreneurs, we want the best entrepreneurs, but hey, like you want the best entrepreneurs, sure, right? Like you want the most geniuses, sure, right? And we can talk about the benefits of that, but the majority of immigrants to US are low income, and the ones causing civil unrest or that people are complaining against are um, lower income, right? And they affect the lower class. So you have like this. You can think of it like, oh, there's this buffer. Like you've added this cost to businesses to hire labor, right? So like work hours, unions, yada yada, and basically illegals can come in and arb that difference,
Hmm.
right? Because they're like, hey, we'll take the money under the table and stuff like that. And there's no shortage of these illegals, right? As you can see, they come from all over South America and stuff like that, right?
But wouldn't the issue be like you're like taking the livelihood of the existing population, right? At least we see. I'm in California right now. You see in construction or like landscaping, all these jobs have been displaced to like these informal work, right? Versus the formal worker with all the insurance and all that incorporation and stuff and taxes. Wouldn't isn't there like a case to say like we should not allow this? This is not fair competition.
Yeah, yeah, you can do that, but then the cost of that thing would just rise, right? So like let's say like every you have to like magically, right? Like all the illegals are offered the same benefits and all the same protections and paid the same wage, right? Then the cost of that thing would just go up, right? So it impedes progress, right?
So wouldn't that be just helping the upper middle class and the upper class versus like um, just helping the average person?
Well, the average person wouldn't be able to afford any of the things,
No, no, so
right?
they'll be part of the labor pool benefiting from this, like the lower class. That's why we see like a lot of like a partition of like demographics supporting these illegals, right? So you see a lot of certain groups supporting these illegals versus some other groups are not supporting, right?
Um, so like in construction, like it's a bit tricky because there's also like a bunch of red tape and everything that like adds to the cost, right? So like there's a reason why like you can get something built in authoritarian countries really fast. It's not just cheap labor, they have low regulation, there's no zoning laws, right? Or
And
there's very
code.
little, right? And there's like environmental protection laws, right? So all of these like add up, right? So I would argue that this stuff, right? All these like regulations add up to a lot more than just the labor, right? So like you have like this huge chunk of extra stuff that just gets added to the construction of a building. And that sort of prices out people, right? Cuz you think about it, like a person needs to work 20 years to justify this group of people building this one property for a couple of years, right? But like if they do it fast, right, and if there isn't this amount of stuff, right? Like if you just look at it from the labor perspective, right? Like you're trading the labor income of one person, just one person,
Mhm,
versus the labor of like 20 people, right, who are building this house, right, for X amount of years. You know what I mean, right? So like, and then it's obviously amortized and stuff like that. But if you just look at the labor, it's like, okay, it shouldn't be that much, right? Like it shouldn't take one person 20 years to build a house. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Right? Like especially in California. But now it does, right? And it's like even more unattainable now, right? Just from a
mhm,
like a labor to dollar perspective, right?
mhm,
So what can you do? Like if you don't want to remove the bureaucracy and stuff like that, then you have to lower the price of labor. It's like, right, because like even if I have if even if I'm a laborer, right, like I get that job, right, and everybody's paid well. You see what I'm saying? Like the labor difference for like 20 years, right? My mortgage has to be paid for like 20 years, 30 years, right, and a down payment has to be equivalent to this group of people working this house,
mhm.
right? And this gap in between is like red tape, bureaucracy, and corporate profits, right? Whatever, like, right?
Yeah. So like, wouldn't there be an argument to instead of like trying to do the race to the bottom for labor, wouldn't want to make the existing labor pool more productive, like
Yeah,
via automation
yeah,
or
of course, of course. But it's just hard in construction. It's just hard, right?
okay,
Like it's just hard to do, right?
and like our agriculture, I think these are the biggest.
Agriculture is a bit easier. Like we do have like industrial farming now, right? Like
No,
there's huge tools and stuff like that that
mhm.
definitely make it much more efficient, right? Although it
But I
has
think
its
fruits and
issues.
vegetables is still too hard
Yeah, yeah.
for
I mean, there's
robot.
definitely right, but now we have like drones and stuff, right? That are trying to make it more efficient, right? But
Mm,
in like construction and things like that, it's also like very like location specific, right? There's just a lot of complexities that go into it. So like, does that make sense? Where I'm like trying to say like, you just have like this huge amount of labor versus one person, right? One person
the
for 30
yeah,
years, right?
yeah, the
Versus like this,
equilibrium.
yeah, the equilibrium's just off balance, right?
Yeah,
Right?
it
Like
doesn't make sense.
if I raise this one person, if he's part of the same thing, so you're also raising this the the labor for the 20. the 20. So like it has to be the labor has to come from outside construction itself to like offset the existing system, right? Like
Okay, then why is California trying to offer these undocumented immigrants benefits such as like Medicare?
I mean, it's California's too rich. I mean, it's just trying to get votes, right? Like that's the truth, right? Like you know, and they want to, this is, you can say like, I'll get attacked for this, which is like this isn't humane, right? Like in a way, right? You're like, why shouldn't they have this? Why shouldn't they? Well, the truth is they weren't born in America. That's why they don't have it. Like, what are you gonna do? Turn Africa into America? Turn South America into America? You can't. You don't have enough money to do that.
That's my next point. Like, so without this, basically effectively removes borders, right? You allow mobility of labor like this, right? When wouldn't you need to like dismantle the welfare state then? Like, sort of
Yeah.
like,
So like the best way to do this is you just dismantle the welfare state, right?
like
Like you,
completely.
yeah, completely. You just dismantle. You basically you can like import this huge swath of like cheap labor to like build all your stuff, and you can have you need to combine this with getting rid of red tape, right? So like that's the hard part, to be honest. Like all this zoning laws and things, they like artificially keep housing high.
Isn't that what the Gulf states are doing in like Saudi Arabia, Qatar?
Yeah, well, like every country does this, right? Like Singapore and everything. So like every country that imports citizens, they're trying to fix this problem, right? But we run into this issue where there's, and like Lee Kuan Yew talked about this. So he's the prime minister of Singapore, the guy who created Singapore. He's like, you need social cohesion, and he puts the number somewhere at like 10 to 15%, right, maximum. So like you can only take in like 10% of your existing population. I'm not sure if it's like over a certain period of time or it's like a year or however many years. I forget, but there's a limit to how much you can grow, right? And you don't want the the existing population doesn't want to feel displaced, and the existing population doesn't want to feel threatened, right? They don't want to feel like this place is changing too fast into like some foreign country, right? Which is what we're facing in the United States.
What will like what Canada did with the temporary foreign workers? Like, why
So
did they? Yeah, you.
okay, so like the problem with Canada is like it's a good idea, sort of. So they open the floodgates for a bunch of like Indian students to come here, right? Because they're like, oh, they're students and they speak English, right? They tend to be more well educated, uh, rather than sort of the uh, lower class in India. So it seems like a win-win, right? Get a bunch
They
of
were self-selected.
right. They self-selected. We'll let them in, right? They speak English. They'll be culturally cohesive. But the problem is, like Canada doesn't. Um, we don't need more educated citizens. That's the truth. Like the students here don't have jobs.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like where's these like where you have a bunch of new students coming in. Who's gonna give them jobs? What are they gonna do, right? And of course they work the restaurants now. They they do all the jobs that Canadians quote unquote don't want to do, right? But they're also not happy about that, right? Because they've been sold this like Canadian dream, right? They're like, hey, we're educated, we're smart, right? Like we sacrificed a lot to come here. Like why are we doing this, right? Like why are we there's like we might be getting better gigs in India, right?
Hmm.
So we're right. So they just come here and right there they're forced to live in terrible conditions in their opinion, right? Which I mean, in compared to the average Canadian, it is, and they didn't really sign up. So you see a lot of protests against that, right? And
Hmm.
and because we've imported so many at once, we also see them. There's like cultural impacts of that right? And this is normal. Like when like people like to say, "Oh, you're just racist, you're just, whatever." But like every first generation immigrant has faced racism, right? Like we sort of talked about this last episode, which is just like you sort of get hazed in, right? It's basically your kids and your grandkids, they become part of the new nation,
Mhm.
right? But as a first generation, you keep a lot of habits and customs and norms of your home country, and that comes in conflict with Canada, right, or the country you've immigrated to.
So why did we immigrate so many at once though? Like, if I remember correctly, there's like 1 million a year at the peak. And obviously, that number has like died down quite considerably, but it's still like hundreds of thousands per year, and they all go to like two major cities,
Yes,
Vancouver and Toronto. So
right,
that exacerbates the housing crisis even more, right?
exactly. So like that's what I'm saying. So they didn't think this through. So the problem is, okay, so Canada needs we need more people. Okay, right? But we never thought about, or the government never thought about what kind of people we needed, right? They just thought, hey, like we need more people. These are the problems that immigration faces: lack of cultural cohesion, language, and like manners, right? Or like not well behaved, right? Like
Or
crime.
culture, just
Yeah. It's another aspect of culture, right? So like we'll pick an English country, people that want to come, and right, and they're well off, and they mitigate these factors. But the problem, Canada itself needs, again, I say it needs jobs. So like, how do you get jobs? Well, like you need to have government policy for these people, right? Like, are they coming here to build roads? Are they coming here to build this new pipeline? Are they coming here to build more houses because we have a housing crisis? Well, if they're coming here to build more houses, then you can't get students, right?
yeah,
Because like students, they're not very good at building houses, and they don't want to build houses,
yeah.
right? So you want the lower end of the labor pool, right? The less educated, right? You
So you
want
need
them to come here.
an industrial policy to pair with your immigration policy, right?
Yeah, right. You can't, right, and that needs to be balanced with how much population you can take, right? Like where these people go and how fast they can assimilate to your existing culture to not cause disruption. Because look, there's a cost to these people coming here, right? They use public goods, infrastructure, etc., right? Public health, yada yada, right? And then there's the social lack of social cohesion, there's the disruption, there's angst created, there's just the existing population has to tank a little bit of this unhappiness, or this, like, not unhappiness, I guess it's lack of familiarity, right? This is something new, you're sort of shocking the system every time, right? So like, right, and there's a reason why, like, if you have like a very entrenched system, right, very entrenched culture, a culture with lots of norms, lots of rules, right, structure, right, it's very hard for someone to break in. And the example of that would be Japan, right? Like right, they don't even take, right, like you look Japanese, but like if you don't follow all the stuff, which I don't even know all the rules, right, they'll just like, you're not Japanese, like you're not one of us, right? Whereas
Mhm.
like in Canada or in the US, we can argue. So there's argument, like, you know you don't need to do much to become one of us, right? And you can argue, oh, like maybe Japan has a lot of culture, right? It's been there for a very long time. So for you to be considered Japanese, like you have to absorb all that culture, right? And for you to be considered America, because America's a newer nation, Canada's a newer nation, and like we're still trying to figure out what kind of culture we have, um, what's like actually our culture. It's much easier to assimilate, and it's been assimilating new people nonstop, and you can see the pushback, right? Like we always say, oh, there's right? Like Nazis or KKKs or whatever you want to call them, right? Rednecks, um, and they're just racist and stuff like that. But it's not true. I don't think that's true. You know, like yes, there are always extremists, but it's the majority of the population just feels like they're getting displaced, right? They're getting smaller and smaller, right? And that's why you see this on Twitter, where it's like the white displacement theory or whatever it's called. But it's like
Mhm.
they it, in a way they are, right? But that's because there's no cultural identity, right? So like you can join a new culture, but like if you adopted everything that was Japan and you knew all the customs, right? You might not be able to become Japanese. Heck, your
Mhm.
kids might not even become Japanese because of all the stuff. But it might take like your great grandkids before you become considered one of the pack, right? And in the US, because there's like, in Canada, because it's so lax and loose, right? But the existing people are always like, hey, like, what are we doing? What's our culture?
Mhm.
Like, right? And that's why you see like there's African American culture and then there's African culture, right? And the Africans don't even mesh with the African Americans. You see what I mean, right? Like that's pretty interesting, right? Like Africans identify more with the conservative culture, right? Than they do with the hood culture or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think that's a whole episode on its
Yeah,
own.
yeah.
Like
That's
how
that's
Black
another
people in
topic
America.
on like cultural cohesion, but
But let's get back on topic of like upward mobility. So a lot of these first generation immigrants, they're making huge sacrifice and taking huge risks, right, to move to a new country, different culture. Even if their skill sets don't match up with what their opportunity is, like you see with all these new Indian students. But it's quite obvious to see that there's not a lot of upward mobility going on in the future. Are they going to continue to eat this cost, or are they just going to go home? Because they're not stupid either. They're rational actors as well, right? It's like, okay, India's growing. India has lots of opportunities. I'm like a first class citizen, like
yeah,
back
so
home.
exactly, right? So like as countries become more and more equal, country people will move back, right? Like you've seen El Salvador, also Salvadorians go back. Like there are only a few reasons why you would emigrate to another country. Nobody wants to move, right? Like you're in your home. Why are you moving across state? Well, it's usually economic opportunity, security, right? Education, right? These are mainly the three reasons.
Or
You would
family.
you but I assume you don't have a family because you're a first generation immigrant,
All right, right, yeah, yeah, sure.
right? So like, or I guess like this is security too, but like political or like religious prosecution, right? So like
Mhm.
political instability, right? And in return for the new nation that you emigrate to, that for them to give you that, you take a cut in labor, right? That's the classic trade-off, right? And that's what every generation of immigrants, right? But now people are saying, hey, you should come here, right? The leftist or whatever you want to call them, they're saying, hey, you should come here. We should let you come here, but you don't pay the cost, right? That's fair, right? Because we're humanity, right? And the right's like, hey, we can't just give this stuff for free, right? And you can see how both sides have an argument. Obviously, um, you know, uh, I think economics rules everything, so uh, it won't really work, right? And we're seeing the limits of this, like, oh, my open immigration policy, right? Like, there's also a certain number of people you can accept, right?
Mm.
Right? Right?
S- Yeah. So, given that we tried to steelman the how immigration can be good, like let's try to steelman why immigration can be bad.
Uh, Oh, yeah. Like, there are many downsides. Like, you're gonna have to take an increase in squalor, lack of cultural cohesion, right? We talked about that, and then it's like if you don't have the proper sort of government policies, right? We're facing that right now, increase in housing, right? Like,
Mhm.
right in Canada, they're all in two cities, like you said. Well, what does that mean? That means like everyone else has to pay more, right, to live there, right? So like, when you're finding immigration, you really need to figure out why you want that, right? Like, what are you trying to do with all these extra people, right? The problem, like if you think of it like a pyramid, right? It's not the Canada, like with and the US, right? The It's not the lower income that's the problem. The bottom of the pyramid is almost never the problem. It's always the middle of the pyramid. They can't move up anymore, right? The middle of the pyramid can't move up. Why? Because there's no bottom layer. So what happens? The middle of the pyramid gets stretched down, right? So you're pushing people into that lower, right? So what you need is you actually need a bunch of lower skilled immigration or lower educated immigration to come in and push it up, and you have to eat that cost.
Wouldn't that just move the average down for everyone and move the median down for everyone?
Moves Well, no, the new people take the blunt of it.
But like, there's only finite opportunities in an economy, right? So, like, let's say, unless the economy is growing overall,
Well,
you're saying,
you can grow it, right? So like let's say you have a bunch of infrastructure projects that the US needs to do. Okay? Or like Canada. We can use Canada for an example, right? So like instead of importing a bunch of Indian students, right? Like how I would have done it is maybe have some basic requirement that you can speak English, right? Then I would hire a bunch of lower skilled labor, right? I'd get rid of. Okay, so like this is gonna sound like to the leftist people, this is gonna sound like anti-human or humanitarian, but like here they face the same conditions in their home country, if not worse. So like there's a reason they choose to come here, right? And they didn't come here to just to get a golden spoon, right? So I would get rid of all the workplace protection stuff. Not all of it, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it you don't really need. um get rid of all the, like, let's say I want to build this pipeline. Okay, then these people will be situated along all the provinces in certain towns, a certain amount of them, right? They can either be completely segregated or there'll be government housing where a mix of these immigrants are incorporated. So like it's like Singapore, right? So like they don't let all the immigrants form in one place. So like you wouldn't have Chinatown and you know all this, right? Like all these little things. Everyone lives in the same place, right? That way it builds bonds, right? So like that way, when their kids grow up, they don't think of, hey, like I'm Chinese, or like, hey, I'm
well,
right.
why can't you just deal with the indigenous population right now? Everyone's focusing on like post-secondary education. Why can't we just make a giant apprenticeship program and just leverage our underutilized youth as it is?
They just wouldn't take the lower pay. The point is you need the lower pay. You need to rebalance the housing, right? So like
Mhm,
the reason housing is so expensive, like this is like a Canadian episode, right?
mhm,
Is like they got a bunch of FDI, right, to like pump up
mhm,
the housing price, right? Why did
mhm.
they need to pump up the housing price? They
Government's
need more.
bankrupt.
Yeah, the government's bankrupt. They need more tax dollars, right? And they need to buy votes, right? So they need to give
The
more
boomers.
wealth, yeah, more welfare programs. That's why you see like in Vancouver, even though the real estate's the most expensive, they got all this, right? They got all these local tax dollars, and what do? They funnel it into I don't know, like drug programs and whatever, right? Rehab programs and all of that, right? Giveaways, right? And then the locals can't afford the housing, right? So it's like if you didn't need that money, right? Then you wouldn't have gotten into that situation. You didn't want to buy votes, right? And then they're like, okay, well let me get these people in to like fix that, and then well now you just pumped it up even more.
Well, isn't there a fine line between this and like I might get in trouble for this, like human trafficking? Like this
It's
is
voluntary.
but they can't necessarily leave though, right? It's like
What
sort
do you
of
mean?
like the Chinese people that built the railroad. They just sort of like got scammed, right, into building the railroads, right? It's like they didn't know how dangerous it was and how bad the conditions were and how, but they got paid well, but they.
At the end of the day, you can make it. There are rules you can put in place that they're not they don't get exploited, right? But zoning regulations, you can get rid of that. Environmental regulations, you can get rid of that, and then you just pay them whatever you want to pay them, and then just be like, hey, you can come here, right? You can work here. I think like if I were to do it, I'd be like, hey, you can't move provinces. Like if you come here, you can't move provinces. Like you're stuck in Manitoba, right? Right that way we can disperse you across the country, right? And
Why,
then
why can't we do like industrial policy where you stay in this like a quote unquote reserve
exactly.
for these workers, and then once you pay off your time on this reserve, you maybe the reserve's not really good word for it, but you get the idea. But
Those No, I do. That's a bit extreme. So like
yeah.
I don't think you want it where it's like they're segregated because like
Mm,
then it becomes like us versus them where it's like I would rather it be something where it's like you can't leave this province, right? So like if you come, we'll pay you this much money. Okay? You'll get this much money. You'll do this job and we'll maybe cover for your health stuff, right?
mhm,
But you're stuck doing this job. And like if you don't want to do this job, you're free to leave. Okay? Like nobody's forcing you to stay. You can go back, right? And that's like clear terms, right? You come here, you do this job. In return, what are you gonna do? You're gonna build infrastructure. You're gonna build roads. You're gonna build housing. And because you are building housing, you are building roads, you are doing this stuff, we will give you a free unit in that housing. So like and my idea is like, hey, you get like sort of like government in Singapore where it's like, hey, you get government housing, right? And you get cheaper housing and the units are not like, hey, we don't want like a monocultured units. It's not monocultured. It's like you're assigned a unit. You know what I mean? And you're assigned a unit. So that way you mix with, you're used to multiculturalism, right? You get
mhm.
used to multiculturalism and you get to mesh with existing communities, right? Like we don't want it segregated so it's just like all the immigrants versus all the naturals. But then it's like, right? And your kids also get to go to school, right? So like you get education, right? So you get all these benefits, right? So it's not like, hey, yo, you get nothing, right? Like, and you're free to leave if you want to leave, right? You're free to leave.
Well, okay. We talked about populism from one side of the aisle. What about like from the left? So like Bernie has like been on record to saying like his displeasure with immigration and especially low skill immigration because he wants like a federal minimum wage, $15 an hour. Like when introducing flooding, opening floodgates with low skilled labor disrupt that type of agenda, and wouldn't those people be deeply upset with this type
Well,
of policy?
the problem is, right? Like the problem is you get a low flood immigration, and guess what? Your infrastructure is not keeping up, and that's why the everyday person is against immigration, right? All they see is crime, right? They see uh, people they're not used to in their communities, and they don't see their communities getting better, right? Like, let's say, right? Like, you do have the Chinese come in or whatever, and and then you see the railroad. Then you're like, oh, okay, right? You get a railroad. Oh, that's
But
pretty
there's
cool.
also lots of displeasure with it. They literally burned down Chinatown because they took a lot of the low skilled labor jobs, right?
Yeah, so like there's only a certain number of these you can do, and they need to be dispersed, so you can't have them in every, right? It can't be concentrated, right? And
Mm.
the U.S. sort of did it, right? And I wouldn't do it that fast, right? But at the end of the day, you need these labors, right? And the labors are best used for public goods, and then their kids can contribute more in like the private sector, right? Even farming, right? It's like and stuff like that, right? These farming companies, I'd be like, okay, well, if you want to use this programmer or something, right? Where then you have to contribute to the local economy or like the local infra somehow.
But within the counter argument, so why can't these be union jobs with like a
Cost
living
is too high.
wage?
Cost is too high.
That's
That's the whole
possible.
point, right? Like I told you, it's like you're trading one person's labor for like
Hmm.
30 years for like these 20 laborers for X amount of years, right? So like if it's 20 laborers and then you have like regulation and all these things, and it's 20 years and it takes them 5 years to build a house, right? And you have like design, you have all this stuff, right? The labor just never adds up, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
it would always be more. It take that one person way more, right? So like how are you gonna change that, right? So that the labor is equivalent or at least it's reduced, right? Then you have to
That
like lower
multiplier.
the
Yeah.
yeah, you have to lower the price of labor for one end or increase the price of labor for the other guy, right?
So like we talk about the upper mobility for the new coming immigrants. What about the existing indigenous population? Like if the indigenous because we have to maintain social order, right? There'll be unrest if these people feel like, or they just won't participate in like society.
Yeah, but you'll see it with lower wait, you'll see it with new government services, right? You'll see better roads, newer roads, better public transportation, right? Better, infra altogether, right? It should lead to cheaper energy costs, cheaper food costs, right?
But what if I'm just an Uber driver or a FedEx driver? Like I can't compete with these people. They work harder than me and they're younger than me. Like how do you what do you tell this dude?
What do you mean? Like they're gonna get replaced by immigration, like
Yeah,
FedEx?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, the FedEx dude. Like he can't outcompete these dudes.
Yeah, but so you can limit them, right? Like I said, you can
Mhm,
you can force these people to work into infrastructure.
mhm.
But let's say there's no cultural issue, because like I think you would need like if we're importing a ton, right? So like let's say the infra's fixed, and you get like a depreciation labor in FedEx and all of these things, right? But then you're just like, then these people can do other things, right? Because like FedEx would just become more efficient if you have more people doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like imagine the deliveries do a lot faster. Like there'd just be a lot, right? There would just be more deliveries because people
Mm.
right now people don't use FedEx because it's too expensive.
Like the Chavon's law, like if stuff gets cheaper, you actually use it much more.
Yeah,
Or
right. Like right now, like for example, like right now, I don't we don't use runners for anything because we don't have the infra and it's too expensive. But let's
what do you
say
mean by rent?
so like let's say you forgot something somewhere and you're like, hey, like maybe some guy can go pick it up for me, right? Like couriers, right?
They
In
do
the
have
old
it,
days.
but it's expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive, right? Nobody uses it, right? It's not an unuseful service. It's too expensive. But like
Mhm.
let's imagine we have a lot of people and couriers can be done cheaply. Housing can be done cheaply. You know what I'm saying? Like everything gets cheaper.
So deflation. So
Not
that
not
even if
exactly,
you
right?
okay,
Your economy is growing in
well,
real
like
terms.
I'm talking price deflation, right? In
Yeah,
real
price
terms.
deflation, yes, but like in real terms, your economy is growing,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't really have to deflate. It's just like you can inflate like the dollar value as a whole. You can inflate it, right?
But, but but these are humans, right? Like it's not they're not as elastic. They're like their skill sets and like finding opportunities not. I think you mentioned like having a slow ramp up of this or slow rollout of immigration, but I think it's still going to be difficult, right, for these people.
I mean, there's this whole other issue of like what we do with educated people because of AI and everything like that, right? Like the upper
Mhm,
mobility, that's like a separate thing.
mhm.
But in terms of like the immigration right now, right? The problem I see is just we're immigrating too much middle class and upper class, right? Like what are you going
Oh, especially in Canada, right?
yeah, in Canada, right? In the US it's more illegal, right?
Yeah.
It's but they need that, right?
Hmm.
They have whole hidden economies that thrive on that, right? Like there's another reason why the left are pro illegal immigrants, because these illegal immigrants pay their rent. Right. Right, like, so they're taking advantage of like housing laws to like squeeze these people into, you know, into these immigrant homes that they own, and then they lease them out. And you can see that everywhere. You can see that in Canada too, right? There are these Indian students that live really, right, you see that in New York too. Like they live in these
Mhm.
really cramped places, right, for not cheap, right? That's just what happens.
So rent seekers also want to
Yeah, they
support
want to keep,
immigration.
yeah, they want these people coming in because that's how they're getting, that's how they're making it, right? And like upward mobility is like another issue we can talk about in itself, like why we're facing this issue. But
But wouldn't you want to also flood the upper and middle class personnel as well? Wouldn't that abundance of labor in those sectors also help the country?
yeah, so like once you do have an abundance of labor, you do open up a lot more business opportunities, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because sorry,
yeah,
like I understand, like in like East Asian countries or especially in China, software engineer labor is really cheap. So SaaS is not really a thing because everyone just writes their own their own internal tech stack because you just have your own engineers. It's much cheaper than paying for SaaS
yeah.
services.
So like you are seeing depreciation, right? Like in a way, but as long as the cost of goods and public infra keeps pace, then the people will feel better. You know what I mean? Like the people will feel like
Even
content.
nominal salaries stay flat or go down as long as like goods
Yeah.
prices of goods go down. It's okay.
Yeah, like people just don't want to notice like, hey, my grocery bills is going up, right? But
Mobile
maybe this
employment.
is
Mobile employment. Like so, you see in Canada, there's huge unemployment right now. Like how do you fix this? Even
right.
like
So
people can't even get like low skilled labor jobs, right? Obviously, it's there's too many people even for low skilled labor, right?
yes, but that's because there's all this stuff in place, right? So like first, like let's say we do get rid of a lot of these like environmental regulations, zoning regulations. Don't you think there'd be a lot more building projects? There would
Mhm.
be, right? Let's say you get rid of like a lot of these like bureaucratic stuff, right? Like the city governments do approve things a lot faster, right? Guess what happens, right? You would have a lot more building, right? There's a reason. They're like they say, oh, China's real estate boom got them out of poverty, right? You can unleash a real estate boom here if the government has the will, which is hard because rich people don't want to have their see their property value go down,
Mhm.
right? And and then you have all these like environmental protection people and all of this stuff who say, "Oh, we're fighting for the workers," but they're really not because they're keeping it locked in, right? They're not letting. They have like regulatory capture in a way.
It's like those union dock workers. They apparently refuse to allow automation at their ports.
Yeah.
That's
Well, like I mean, automation is a different thing, but it's like it's the same idea,
any
right?
closing thoughts for
Huh? Immigration good, yo. We need more, but it's hard.
it's
The other
hard.
thing is like America, like we can do this in another episode. It's just like there's like the cultural aspect of it, right? It's just like how you gonna assimilate. How do you assimilate immigrants faster, more effectively, right? And then there's, you know, we touched on it this episode. It's just like you actually want low labor immigrants, not like high scale, right? We already have that. Like we get the
Yeah.
benefits of brain drain, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone they come here, they're rich, right? They're in these cities, right?
Mhm.
But people don't feel good, right? That's like the
Mhm.
closing thought, right? It's like, right, that you see, oh, right, oh, the rich Saudis, the rich Chinese kids, they come here with Lambos, they buy up all our houses, right? Then they, take our elite education spots, and then, right? And then it's like, oh, they're these, you know, crime people. They come here and they commit crime, right? They rape our people, right? Like whatever Donald Trump says in his in every single one of his
Eat your
speeches.
cats and dogs.
Yeah, eats your cats and dogs, and rape our things and all that, right? So like that's everything that people sees. But you need to show them, right? Like if you have a good industrial policy and sort of set these terms, right, and let them come willingly, which I don't think there will be a lack of. Okay,
Mhm.
like you can get them to do like build things that are right for cheaper, and you can say, oh, right, and then we cover that argument, right, which is like, why don't we do that for existing? Because it's too expensive. Yeah, like
Well, I think
most
the closing thought is like
yeah,
bring as many as we can, but don't leave them idle, right?
yeah. Well, like you need to have industrial policy. I
Yeah,
but like it- I'm a pro industrial policy. Like,
yeah.
you know.
All right. We'll just leave it at that.